because bilateral series were coming and they were going, and you didn't really remember them after too long. So here are points adding up to something. But I also wonder, in a T20-driven generation, in an IPL-driven generation, would people be interested in something that's trying for 2 years that just has a 1-week moment of glory? And I wonder, yes, England, Australia, the three powers, maybe New Zealand, but what beyond them? Would the World Test Championship mean anything to the West Indies? Would it mean anything to Pakistan? Would it mean anything to Sri Lanka, as I discovered to my dismay when it went along to South Africa? But overall, I thought yes. Let's find out who's the best. I wasn't quite sure how the point system will play out. 120 points per series. Yeah, that sounds fine, 120 points per series. But Australia playing an away series in England, they win 2 games, they get 48 points. India playing this very tough away series in Australia, they win 2, they get 60 points. You play a home series against a side that's way below you. You play a 2-test series, you win 1, you get 60, you win 2, you get 120. So this difference in value for winning a test match, I thought didn't take into account the enormity of the contest, the toughness of the contest, and I thought if I had to conceive a plan to get into the final of the World Test Championship, I'd play 2 test match series at home on pitches that I like. Before we actually get on to that road to glory, a few small things that had large outcomes. Over a period of 2 years, you don't think they could be that important. And yet, that great Headingley test match, England versus Australia, that review that Tim Payne took, what on earth? I mean, I'm sitting at home watching it, and I'm thinking, why are you taking that review? As a result of that review, then Lyon gets Stokes out, but the umpire misses it. Then there's a run out. Little things all happening in a small time frame. And did that cost Australia? Or did the fact that they bowled 2 overs short in Melbourne, cost them 4 points, and that's what cost them a place in the final? They could still have got there if they'd gone to South Africa. Given the current state of South Africa, Australia could have won that series. They could still have been there, but COVID, protocols, mindsets, Australia didn't go there. Just little things that as we realized, had large outcomes. What was the highlight of this World Test Championship phase? There'll be so many, I'm only going to pick 2. One is outstanding 4th innings run chases. That is one of the greatest aspects of Test match cricket. Great 4th innings run chases. And how many did we see? Stokes playing one of the great innings at Headingley. India's chase for the ages in Brisbane. But to me, really, if I had to pick one performance, one moment across these 2 years, it would be Myers and Bonner. 50 odd for 3, chasing 390. In Chattogram against Bangladesh spin, Myers makes 210 not out, and Krumar Bonner's with him. Cross your hearts, take a truth serum test. How many of you knew of those 2? It was one of the most beautiful stories of this phase. The first ever World Test Championship, wow. And only 2 teams standing. This is their story. This is their road to glory. So India start their campaign in the World Test Championship. First 7 test matches.
That's it!
This was Don Bradman's 1948 side playing Invincibles. There was not a test match in which there was a semblance of a contest. India went to the West Indies, and it had to strike you. Anybody who knew about previous Indian tours, 76 to the West Indies, 83, 89, that all those struggles against pace, to see Indian fast bowling taking apart West Indies and the ineptitude against facing fast bowling. A West Indies batsman unable to face Indian pace. For someone of my generation, that was unthinkable, and that was a highlight to me. Bumrah in Test match cricket, wow. Bumrah was just running, and I'm sitting and watching at home, and I'm thinking there's a wicket here. It just seems so inevitable. Ishant Sharma takes 5 wickets. I also enjoyed the fact that Ajinkya Rahane played a big part in one of the Test matches. 100 in the same Test match. Hanuma Vihari finally got the 100 that he so deserved. He's such a low-key, behind-the-scenes kind of player. But 2-0 in the West Indies really was a walk in the park, as it was against South Africa. Now, I'm covering that series at home, and I'm thinking, one thing you know about South Africa, they may not any longer have the Smiths, the Callises, the Donald Entinis, Pollock, Steens, take your pick, but South Africa will fight. And to my great disappointment, South Africa never turned up. I mean, you looked at that series, you could identify this was the South African team. At no point did they play like South Africa. Or maybe India were just so dominant they didn't allow them to play like South Africa. But to me, the big thing there was the inevitable. At some point in his career, Rohit Sharma was going to tell the world, I can play Test match cricket. We saw a century in each innings on debut. We saw a double 100 after that. Mayank Agarwal comes in. Virat Kohli gets a double. He had a double in every single Test match. And I'll tell you, sitting in the commentary box, we were just waiting for the game to end because only one team was playing that series. So there you are, 5 Test matches, 5 one-sided games, and then poor Bangladesh arrived. In that first Test, that was probably the only time they might have had an opportunity. There's another double century over there as well. And then we go to the pink Test in Kolkata. Why did the pink Test happen? Simply because somebody said it has to happen. If we had paused to consider the feasibility of the year, availability of balls, considered all that, probably won't have happened. Sort of Ganguly said, now that you decided you're playing, everything else had to fit in. The balls had to arrive, everything else had to happen. But no, India was just too quick. There's something about the lacquer on that pink ball. It was coming far too quick for the Bangladesh batsmen. Too many of them were getting hit. Maybe there was a little problem with the visibility. Whatever, it was still the same contest, same ball for both sides. And I'm afraid Bangladesh just didn't look like they belonged at that level that day. They'd never played a pink ball match before, so you could understand their issues. India are now sitting pretty in the World Test Championship. They've played 7 Test matches. It's a clean sweep. They won all 7. They've got all 360 points on board, and surely no one is going to stop them from getting into the final. Meanwhile, what are New Zealand doing? They've had that traumatic moment in the final of the World Cup. I mean, getting there was a wonderful result in itself, and then a twist of fate, a little quirk in the rules, everything conspiring against New Zealand. They took it on their chin. They were happy, but the rest of the world wasn't. It's one other of those quirks, but it was one of those results that take a long time to get over. And New Zealand went back, and then very soon they're in Sri Lanka. And it was 1-1. I mean, when the first Test happened, they lost it by lunch on the 5th day. Easy defeat, 6 wickets down. You thought, right, here's another Sri Lanka 2-0. But Watling and Tom Latham, typical New Zealand players. Typical. I mean, they don't hit you in your eyes with the headlines, but they're always there. Latham, Watling produce the runs. New Zealand get 1-1, but then they go to Australia. And they just didn't turn it. At that stage, the World Test Championship was throwing up one-sided games. They played 3 Test matches, and people like Warner and Labuschagne and the others just feasting on the runs. Not once did they lose by less than 200. So by the end of 2019, the virus isn't here yet. It's still being whispered about. India has steamrolled the opposition 360 points. They're walking with a swagger, their chest out, their chin up. They're saying, come get me. New Zealand are just sort of whimpering away, coming back home. They've got 60 points, they've been outplayed everywhere, and then India land in New Zealand. New Zealand come back at home, they're a different side at home. New Zealand away versus New Zealand at home is one of the greatest transformations. People say that about India, it's probably truer about New Zealand. I sometimes get the feeling that India just not there. We saw that on an earlier tour, the toil and toil. McCullum got all the runs, Watling got all the runs. But this time, suddenly Tim Southey becomes a player. They discover Kyle Jamieson. India have no Rohit Sharma. And really, it was an insipid performance from India, given all that had happened before in the 7 test matches. It's almost as if India didn't turn up. It actually happens, but sometimes you get that impression that the team just hadn't turned up, and New Zealand just swept that series 2-0. A little blip for India, the start of the most incredible turnaround for New Zealand. And then that viral. Did it come? Was it sent? We don't know. But what it did was it created havoc. All of a sudden, by June 21, when the World Test Championship final had to be played, people became aware that by then you could not have the mandatory 6 series that each team had to play. And so you said, whatever you played till then, because you had to get that final of the World Test Championship out. But it meant some people had played more series, some people played fewer series. How could you just add up the total points? And so they averaged the points. And they said, what percentage of available points have you won? And that's what they did.